Hey everyone, it's Jeff. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. I know it's been a while since I last uploaded, but I'm sure you guys don't want to hear all of my excuses for why. So let's just start talking about our first two opening games of the 2025 to 2026 NBA season. And obviously, a lot of stuff happened. The first game, OKC versus Houston, was absolutely cinema. It was one of the, I think, off the top of my head, might be the best opening night game I've ever watched in my life, at least. And I think that out of the four teams that play today, three out of these four fan bases can walk away feeling pretty happy, with the exception of one, which, if you'd watched the Lakers Warriors game, you probably figure out which team that is, but we'll get to that in a moment. So, first off, the very first note I had was that Houston looked absolutely huge on defense, which makes sense because their starting lineup was on average, I think, 6'10, with Amon Thompson at around 6'7, 6'8, being the shortest player on the court for them. And yeah, I think a very notable decision for them was that they did not start Reed Shepard in this game, which was, I think, a very big talking point because with the loss of Fred Van Vliet, you drafted Reed Shepard third overall last year. He had a very rough rookie season, especially on the defensive end. And I think it was a very telling decision for why Ime Udoka chose not to start in this game. And I think a lot of those reasons really came to light because while I did think Reed was okay, at least offensively, he hit some threes and people were really excited for him because Houston's biggest problem last year was their lack of spacing, right? Especially in the crunch time scenarios, especially in the playoffs versus Golden State. A lot of the times their offense would just really slow down, and the lack of shooting, you can tell, was just really hurting them. And Reed theoretically fills that role for them as this guy who was a great shooter in college, and his one of his biggest traits coming to the league was shooting, right? And today, yeah, he hit some threes. A few of them are pretty deep, but the biggest thing, I think that even though he did shoot 3 for 11 from the field, that's fine. I don't expect him to shoot that badly all the time. I thought most of his shots were fine. He was a little bit trigger happy in the first half, but I think that just comes with trying to install confidence. The biggest thing with Reed was just the defense. It does not seem like this is something that has changed over the offseason. And I don't even necessarily think it's a size thing. I think people want to say teams are picking on him because he's relatively short. I think he's only like 6'2" with a average-ish wingspan. And while that definitely is true, I just think the majority of plays where Reed was getting beat today was not really a size thing, right? I think, off the top of my head, there was this like two straight possession sequence in I think the first quarter where Lou Dort kind of just drove baseline and spun off him without really initiating that much contact. And then the very next play down, Shea came off a high pick and roll and really shook him with a behind the back move and got to the basket for free throws. And those weren't really size issues. Maybe they are athleticism issues. If Reed was bigger and more athletic, he could have covered more ground, right? But it wasn't like he was being backed down or bullied. And yeah, I feel like throughout this game, whenever Reed was in the game, OKC was really just running whoever offense on him. And they did try to go to his zone for a lot of it, partly to hide Reed and also partly to hide like Steven Adams and Sengun from having to guard in the perimeter. And it kind of worked, but then you had guys like Cason Wallace, Adrian Mitchell started knocking down threes. Shea kind of really started this game off pretty slow. I think he only had a few field goals entering the second half at least, but it was really Adrian Mitchell who kept him in it. In the second quarter alone, he had 12 points, hit that huge three, and one three to end the second quarter and to go into halftime. And yeah, I think if he does not make those plays, yeah, in the second quarter alone, he was 3 from 5 from three, and he was honestly really trigger happy, which is surprising coming from the second year guard who only played 36 games last season. It feels like he kind of came in knowing he had this opportunity with J Dub sitting to really seize this chance. And I thought he played really well. I am biased because he did go to UCSB with me, but I just want to give him a shout because I think if he doesn't have that really strong double digit second quarter, I'm not quite sure OKC has enough juice to really pull close at the end of the second half. And yeah, so Reed struggled on defense and offensively, of course, he had that really big turnover at the end of the second OT. Um, yeah, I'm not really sure what to do. Like what Houston kind of does moving forward, I think, with this lineup. I think it's very clear they're missing a point guard. And Sengun obviously is a fantastic passer, and we haven't even talked about him yet, but this might have been the best game I've seen Sengun play in his entire career. I don't think it was his career high. I think he scored like 45 points before. But yeah, I mean, the biggest thing was he shot 5 for 8 from three. And he was really confident going into a lot of these. One of them, one of them, one of them was just one of them was as a trailer in transition. He just came up. It was still pretty early in the shot clock, and he just launched it with no hesitation. And we did kind of get rumors that Sengun was working on his three ball more during the offseason. I don't really put much stock into stuff like that because you kind of hear those things all the time, right? But if Houston really wants to roll out this double big lineup more frequently with Sengun at power forward and either Adams or Clint Capella at center, yeah, if he's going to start shooting threes like this and confidently, like not just from the corner, but from the top of the key where you can do so much in pick and pops and just having him as a trailer, kind of like how the Bucks have used Brook Lopez, that would severely open up their offense, of course. And I don't know how real this is. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a adequate 3 point shooter, considering he has a pretty good touch from free throws. He did go 10 for 11 today from free throw line, although he did miss a pretty big one at the end of the game there. But yeah, Sengun, 39 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists. This is one of the best games I've ever seen him play. And I think defensively, too, he was incredible. I thought he really walled up against several drives. And yeah, he did kind of get into foul trouble, but I feel like almost every single big man gets into foul trouble versus Shea and the Thunder because they're just so good at getting to the rim. And I thought he handled himself pretty well and got some good contests in there. And yeah, just I wanted to give Sengun a shout out because if he keeps playing at a similar level, obviously not averaging 39 points per game, that's pretty unreasonable. But it does seem like he has another step to take, especially as a scorer. I think he did a lot as kind of almost like a very big wing from like the mid range today. He had a few just off the dribble moves, face ups from like the elbow, which if I think his game previous to this has been a lot more just predicated on post ups and those little like flip shots in the paint, which he did get a lot of today, especially with Alex Caruso guarding him. I loved how aggressive he was against that matchup. When he saw he had a smaller guy on him, kind of like how OKC put Caruso up against Jokic, Sengun did not hesitate to back him down and really just get close to the rim. But aside from that, I thought he had some really interesting stuff just kind of off the dribble from the mid range today as well. And so, yeah, if he's going to keep expanding his game like that and really kind of join guys like Embiid and Jokic and, Karl Anthony Towns as like really three-level scorers, then there's no reason why he can't average like over 25, 26 points per game while being this amazing passer from center. Kevin Durant was Kevin Durant. He had some really just weird mistakes in this game, which I think are not characteristic of him, of course. There was that timeout that he almost accidentally called, which would have cost Houston the game at the end of the first overtime because they ran out of timeouts and what should have been a technical foul, and he was very lucky the refs didn't call it. He had a few just really weird turnovers where he kind of just got stripped by Cason Wallace and I think Lou Dort as well. They were really smothering him all night, but he still came away with some really huge shots. And I think especially in the first half, their offense still did kind of look very disconnected. And KD really bailed them out with some just frankly ridiculously tough mid-range step back jumpers, that type of thing. You're really starting to see him live more and more from that mid-range area, which I think is okay given his age. But yeah, he wasn't amazing today, but hit some really spectacular shots. And I think that he showed why you traded for him, of course. And it wasn't his best game. But I also think that, yeah, if they didn't have KD today, they would have lost by a lot more because he really kind of hit some huge shots to bail them out of tough situations and tough possessions. But yeah, moving on because I'm talking way too much about the Rockets. OKC, I think I don't have that much to say. They were awesome. They kind of went down kind of biggish. It was like, I think 9 or 10 points in the first half. And Shea really came alive in the second half. And Chet Holmgren was incredible in the first half to keep them in the game along with AJ Mitchell. And yeah, you're missing Jalen Williams, who is your all NBA player, all defensive team, all star. Like, this is someone who you can't win a championship without. And yet they looked pretty good without him versus a team who I think a lot of us are expecting to at least be Western Conference title contenders, right? So yeah, you just walk away feeling pretty good. The depth looks as good as ever. Aaron Wiggins, Lou Dort, Caruso, Jalen Williams, even Brooks Barnheiser got some run in the second quarter, and he did an okay job against Sangoon too. And yeah, I really respect Mark Daigneault's willingness to just go 12 guys deep in the very first game of the season. I think that's absolutely a huge flex, considering you're down Jalen Williams, right? And yeah, Cason Wallace defensively was just absolutely a monster. He had 4 steals, which I don't even think fully captures just how good he was. The point of attack defense this guy brings on defensive end is just absolutely insane. It's very similar to what Drew Holiday and Marcus Smart and all these guys who have won, like, sorry, not won deep boys because Holiday didn't, but I think if he was playing 30, 40 minutes a night, like he did today, he played 42 minutes, he would absolutely make an all NBA defensive first team. Yeah, I can't express how impressed I was by him today. Also hit a lot of big threes. The fact that he's also just such a good shooter is really just like unfair. He feels like someone who, if he wasn't playing behind two of the best guards in basketball, would probably be like a borderline all star, I think. I'm not sure I'd go quite as far to say he's like a Drew Holiday level player because I don't think he has quite the same off the dribble creativity. He's more of like a off ball kind of shooter type player. Definitely more of a combo guard. Maybe like a Derek White light is what I would say, who is a borderline all star player. What I'm trying to say is Cason Wallace really impressed me. May have been overreacting, but this guy was incredible today. So big shout out to him. And yeah, I don't really have much else to say about the Thunder besides like, good job, you guys took care of business. This was a really impressive win in double overtime, considering you were missing your second best player, who is like probably, I think, in most people's books, at least a top 20 guy, right? So huge win. But yeah, as for Houston, I think they are going to have to seriously think about trading for a point guard later on in the season because I think Udoka's decision not to start Reed kind of speaks to how he doesn't really trust him that much. And yeah, I think even so, like Reed just isn't also a natural point guard. I think he's more of like just a true hybrid combo guard where he's very comfortable playing off guard. And I don't think he can really fully run an NBA offense right now, especially not one like the Rockets, where you have a lot of kind of unique players like KD and Sengun and Amon Thompson, right? I don't think he's quite ready for that in the second season at least. So that's definitely something Houston needs to think about seriously. Okay, moving on though. Warriors Lakers. I did miss the first quarter because I was really focused on OKC and Rockets. But yeah, I think that if the NBA season wasn't 82 games long and you could like guarantee health and have like fatigue just be turned off, I could totally see the Warriors winning the NBA championship. And that might sound like an overreaction, but I'm not saying they are contenders necessarily because the NBA season is 82 games long and fatigue does matter. And I have real concerns if everyone can make it there by the end of the season. But yeah, the pieces just they make sense. Jimmy Butler, I think, has just been a huge game changer because the Warriors have really historically kind of, at least in this post KD era, they have struggled to get to the rim and get free throws, and they're very reliant on the outside shot. They have a lot of shooters and just not a lot of guys who can just get to the basket and play make from there. They did have Kaminga, which we'll get to from later on. But yeah, Jimmy Butler, I think, just provides such a safe floor as a guy who's just big and strong and gets to the basket and just draws free throws consistently. He had 10 free throws through the first half alone already. And I think that he fits perfectly next to Steph and Draymond and all these guys, which was a big concern at first, but they are doing these really interesting kind of like screen actions where, especially at the end of this game, they had a really cool one where it was a pick and roll with Steph as a screener and Butler as a ball handler. But the way everyone has to just run to Steph on the perimeter. Sorry, it was a pick and pop because Steph leaked back outside. And he just draws so many guys to him, right? So when you're involving both Jimmy and Steph in the same action like that, and both guys are just freaking out about Steph and trying to like run to him on the perimeter, it just creates such a big runway and so much room and spacing for Butler to get to the rack. And he's super good at it. He dragged two teams to the finals by kind of just grinding his way inside and drawing contact and just kind of like almost like Derrick Henry running down a defense for the Ravens. He kind of just wears you down, right? Jimmy Butler has been fantastic at that for Golden State. He had 31 points tonight, of course, so that was really impressive. And the second biggest thing was Jonathan Kuminga, who I think had, I don't know about one of his best games because he's had some really incredible just scoring games. But in terms of being a guy who I had no concerns over his quote unquote fit or mindset or the personality he's bringing, I thought tonight was a really good example of what a fully fledged Kuminga kind of looks like with the Warriors because he fit in perfectly. He had 6 assists, which is a huge number, and I think that doesn't even like really tell the full story of how willing of a passer he was. I think that historically I have been very critical of Kuminga as a passer. I think he tends to kind of just drive an attack without a plan and doesn't really think about how the defenses will rotate over and who's going to be open based on that. Historically, that's kind of been a point I've really honed in on with him. But tonight, I thought that he would attack. And before the defense would even fully rotate, he was already swinging a rock. And you can kind of tell that he was thinking about how his attacks free up his teammates, right? And yeah, that's just kind of like a big like quote unquote basketball IQ thing, which to be honest, I just wasn't really sure Kuminga was ever going to really fully develop. But he looked really patient today. And of course, he was also just shooting really well. He went 4 for 6 from three, which will always make any game look a lot better, of course, when you're knocking down your threes. But yeah, definitely shout out to Jonathan Kuminga. And like this is the version of Kuminga which the Warriors have kind of really envisioned, right? This is the reason why Joe Lacob has been so in love with him over the last few years. And I don't want to speak too much on this because it was just one game, and we'll see how it plays out over the course of the season. But this was really exciting for me to watch. Steph didn't play super well, but he did have that huge dagger at the end of the game where I think it was from like 35 feet out with 8, 9 seconds still left on the shot clock to send the game away. That was absolutely freaking nuts, of course. Yeah, don't really have much else to say. Will Richard, the rookie, made some really huge plays. He was somehow a -11, which doesn't make sense because I feel like he grabs some really big rebounds and just kind of makes big impact plays. He's a gamer. I'm curious to see if he can make an impact this season as a guy who has a pretty questionable jumper, but just a freak athlete who plays hard defense and I think plays winning basketball. He did win a championship, of course. But yeah, the biggest story though, I think, is the Lakers. So Luka Doncic, incredible game. 43 points, 12 rebounds, 9 assists, right? Fill the stat sheet. Austin Reeves, also pretty solid, 26 points, 5 rebounds, 9 assists. But despite that, I'm seriously concerned for them because they're very much kind of like the polar opposite of the Indiana Pacers or the OKC Thunder from last season, where I guess they like technically have depth, but it's just like it feels like when Luka or AR aren't doing things with the ball, they're just it feels like they're not really doing anything. And it's a little bit baffling to me because I feel like guys like Rui Hachimura or like DeAndre Ayton and even like Jake LaRivia and Gabe Vincent, Marcus Smart, I've seen all of these guys before on different teams creating for themselves and doing stuff, right? Just I know that sounds incredibly vague, but I don't know why it seems like they get to LA and they kind of just lose the ability to go off the dribble and self-create by themselves. I think that even adding LeBron doesn't really change these things, and obviously it will help, but it kind of just feels like they have all the same problems as last year. And this year, I guess, is still kind of technically a bridge season. It feels like the real plan is to wait for LeBron's contract to come off the books this season, and that's when the real work starts. But hey, Luka Doncic is in his prime, right? I'm not sure how old he is, but he's like 28, 29. Sorry, he's only 26 years old. My bad. Um, but yeah, like this is prime Luka Doncic years, and it feels really ironic because you look at Dallas's roster now, and it's incredible. A big part of that is adding Cooper Flag, of course. But if you swap Luka on that team for like Kyrie or AD or whatever, like they're instantly contenders. But yeah, like it just feels like the Lakers they keep recycling the same problems where now instead of like LeBron being the guy who's kind of forced to do everything, it's Luca. And of course, yeah, you have AR, but it feels like in today's like modern basketball, you really want like five guys out there who can you can trust with the ball in their hands to do something to make a play. And again, Golden State I think is a very good team, and they probably would have beaten like 24, 25 other NBA teams today. But you have to beat squads like that to win a championship. And yeah, Luca had like 43 points. He looked amazing. But the whole point of like putting help around players like this, like him and Harden and LeBron, is that so they don't have to score 40 points to have a chance to win. And yeah, as for like the new additions, DeAndre Ayton, I think box score wise, not a bad game, 10 points, 5 for 7 from the field. But again, it seems like very similar issues with Phoenix where it kind of feels like he's just not really making an impact. He did have 4 turnovers too. He had some kind of dumb passes, which I don't think that's been like symptomatic of him over his entire career, and especially defensively, he just for a guy who's 7'1" and like 250, 260 pounds or whatever, who's absolutely huge, he just does not seem to really deter players the way a guy with his physical frame can. And we know he can do it with the Suns. He had a really strong season in 2021, right? And 2022 as well defensively. There were absolutely games and playoff series where he dominated on defense and inside the paint, and you really felt like this guy was one of the best centers in the league. But yeah, definitely did not play like that tonight. Um, I think that hopefully maybe as chemistry grows between him and Luca, maybe like offensively they can utilize him more as well. He didn't really take as many of those little like 9, 10 foot jumpers he likes to shoot, which I guess maybe they can get to more of that. I don't know. I just feel like the kind of overrunning theme with the Lakers today was it was just very underwhelming from everybody besides Austin Reeves and Luka Doncic, and this was kind of like your worst nightmare, right? Is just having like only two guys on the court who can really do stuff with the ball. Um, that's kind of doomed the Lakers the last like 5 years since winning that championship. So yeah, I know it's only game one, and I think the Lakers will win a lot of games still. I think they will still win like 50 games or at least close to that, and probably be at least like a second round playoff team. But yeah, I think that the roster construction issues from last season still haven't exactly been fixed, and they're going to be hard to fix with LeBron's roster still, LeBron's contract still on the roster, of course. But yeah, slightly disheartening note, I know, but that's really all I had for today. Hopefully, I can get to more of these recaps as the season goes on. But yeah, thanks to everybody who tuned in and listened, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.